Welcome back. We've just reviewed the material on Josef Mengele's life in Argentina based on these newly uncovered documents.
Yes.
And the core revelation is staggering. Mengele lived openly, with official help, long after his identity was known, right up until his escape in '59.
And right away, there's a clear opportunity to really maximize the dramatic weight of this whole discovery.
Okay, so a major theme here is the depth of the state's complicity. The material does a great job laying out the timeline.
Right.
How he arrives in '49, gets papers in '50, even uses his real name later. But the true moral horror of it all, it needs to hit the reader much harder and much sooner.
Absolutely. The material has this unique chance to really exploit the ethical tension, the fact that Mengele was living this public, unhindered life.
Right there in Buenos Aires.
Directly alongside Holocaust survivors.
I completely agree. The survivor testimony is in there, and it's incredibly powerful, but its placement, right now, it feels too late.
It's positioned as supporting evidence?
Exactly. Like a detail among facts about his business dealings, when it should be the emotional core of the entire piece.
The full moral weight of what the Argentine authorities failed to do, or rather, chose not to do, it gets lost when that confrontation, that perpetrator-victim dynamic, isn't front and center.
It's not just about a government failing to catch a criminal.
No, it's a profound, almost sickening betrayal that happened day after day on the street, witnessed by the very people he tormented.
So if the whole point of these documents is to show the depravity of the state's protection, we have to lead with the human cost of that protection.
Precisely. So the suggestion is to restructure the narrative, weave those survivor accounts in much earlier and more dramatically.
Use their recognition of him as the anchor.
Use that as the emotional anchor to frame the entire period of official complicity. It just heightens the sense of betrayal so much more.
It makes the bureaucratic facts feel personal.
Infinitely more shocking. The fact that officials knew where he lived becomes 10 times worse when you realize survivors were walking past his house.
You're talking about two completely different realities existing in the exact same space.
Yes.
The perpetrator's impunity and the victim's trauma, literally brushing past each other on the sidewalk.
And the documents prove the authorities knew both realities were there. We need a concrete example to lead this, and the material actually gives us the perfect one.
The juxtaposition?
Yes, explicitly highlight that contrast from Josef Mengele, a survivor of the twin experiments. You have to zero in on that jarring image, seeing Mengele without the uniform.
On the streets of Buenos Aires.
But instantly recognizable. In the same known appearance from the camp, that's the key.
That visual, the SS uniform versus the ordinary suit, that's the narrative engine.
That is the moment the abstract cruelty in the documents becomes visceral.
I see.
Exactly. And you use that moment of recognition to then launch into the discussion of what the security officials knew.
His address, his family, his business.
Everything. Because if a traumatized survivor could recognize him in a split second, what does it say about the intelligence agencies who documented his every move but did nothing?
That framing establishes the moral complicity right from the start.
It gives all the bureaucratic details that follow so much more weight.
So structurally, we're moving the emotional gut punch to the very beginning.
Yes.
And then using the documents to prove that the state was the very entity that allowed that horrifying interaction to even happen. That really does strengthen the core of this.
It makes sure the ethical dimension isn't a side note. It's the foundation for the entire case of institutional failure.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, moving on, the material does a very good job with the long period of protection, and it leads us to that climax in '59.
Right, the point where it goes from passive complicity to
Something else.
to active obstruction.
But that moment, that pivotal legal decision, it feels like it's treated almost like a footnote.
Which is a huge missed opportunity.
To fully establish the so what of the document, the real nature of the official aid, the material has to give more structural weight to the ultimate act of protection, the 1959 extradition denial.
The weakness is clear. The material establishes all the facts, the papers, the use of his real name, the intelligence files. But then the rejection of the West German extradition request is summarized way too quickly.
It's just listed as another event.
It's listed as a fact, not analyzed as the catastrophic turning point it actually was.
And that specific decision, that's the clearest proof of active complicity. It's not just ignorance anymore.
Up until that point, you could maybe argue negligence, incompetence.
Maybe.
But this was a formal, legal choice, a choice to protect him.
So the suggestion here,
We suggest dedicating a distinct, really focused section just to analyzing the significance of that judicial denial. Don't just state the rejection, focus intensely on the specific, frankly shocking, language used by the judge.
Why focus so much on the language itself? Isn't the fact that it was denied enough?
No, because the language reveals the intent. You have to turn this dry procedural fact into a powerful narrative moment that just exposes the depth of the state's betrayal.
The judge's justification is the mechanism.
It is the mechanism.
Okay, so what's the concrete angle?
You zero in on the specific justification. The local judge claimed the extradition request amounted to political persecution.
Political persecution.
That phrase, it's a deliberate, morally bankrupt inversion of reality. You have documents proving he's a known mass murderer, and the state chooses to frame him as a political dissident. It's stunning.
That's not just denying the request. That's aligning with his worldview. It's giving him cover.
Exactly. And then you explore the immediate results of that rule. It was that decision that explicitly enabled Mengele to flee to Paraguay and then Brazil.
It guaranteed his freedom.
It guaranteed his freedom for another 2 decades. The focus has to be on that official act of rejection. It proves government bodies were actively obstructing justice.
This decision is the linchpin.
It's the linchpin that allowed him 20 more years of escape. That justification has to be analyzed as the final, absolute proof of high-level state protection.
So by giving that judicial language its own space, you're turning what could be a single sentence in a summary into the actual climax of the entire Argentina narrative.
Yes. It's where all the systemic failures you've documented culminate in one single, terrible decision.
That's very strong.
It shows intentionality, and that separates profound failure from just, administrative error.
Okay, let's look at what happens after that. The narrative flow. The material handles his escape from Argentina, but then the pacing just seems to accelerate dramatically.
And that's the third major opportunity. The narrative flow abruptly jumps from the intense focus on Argentina and the '59 escape all the way to his death in 1979.
Right.
You lose all the coherence of his life in exile.
The weakness is obvious. You build up this detailed sanctuary in Argentina, and then the last 20 years of his life, Paraguay, Brazil, it's all compressed into a few sentences before you're suddenly at his drowning, his burial under a false name.
And the scientific identification in the '80s, it's too fast. That sudden acceleration, it actually weakens the impact of the central theme, which is sustained impunity.
So the reader might miss the crucial point.
Which is that the protection granted in Argentina successfully guaranteed his freedom for the rest of his natural life.
We don't need a full biography of his time in Brazil, but we do need a smoother transition. We have to keep that theme of evasion resonant.
The suggestion is to provide a slightly stronger narrative bridge, one that explicitly links the freedom he gained from that Argentine judicial ruling to the continuation of his life in neighboring countries.
So the conclusion should reinforce it.
Yes, reinforce how the official protection established in Argentina allowed him to live out his life successfully, just under different aliases. The focus isn't the tiny details of his exile, but the fact of his successful, decades-long evasion.
That makes perfect sense. The story isn't just about Argentina. It's about how Argentina's actions enabled his entire life of freedom. The escape wasn't an end to the story.
It was just a geographical move. The theme of impunity continued. Structure the conclusion to reflect that even after 1959, the theme of concealment and false identity persisted right until his death in '79.
And you bring it full circle.
Bring it full circle by noting that the evasion only truly failed decades later, in the 1980s, when scientific testing finally identified his remains.
That's a fantastic structural anchor. It directly ties the decades of evasion made possible by those first official documents in Argentina to the scientific confirmation of his identity long after he was dead.
It reinforces just how long the effects of that initial state complicity lasted.
Right.
It proves the evasion was successful to the very end, that the protection he secured in '59, based on that perverse ruling, worked exactly as intended. It's a sharp, chilling closure to the whole story of institutional failure.
This has been incredibly constructive. These points really will elevate the material's impact. So, to recap our suggestions.
First, maximize that ethical tension. Use the survivor recognition, specifically Jose Formansky's account, as the emotional anchor for the entire piece. Move that confrontation right to the front.
Second, bolster the institutional failure narrative. Give real structural weight to the 1959 judicial rejection. You have to zero in on the political persecution language. That's the smoking gun for active state obstruction.
And finally, smooth out that narrative jump after 1959. Create a stronger thematic bridge that connects the freedom granted in Argentina to the decades of concealment that only ended when scientists ID'd his remains in the 80s.
These changes will absolutely maximize the impact and coherence. Ensuring the true significance of these documents, the active official aid, is what every reader walks away with.
We're really eager to see the next draft. Deepen those areas of tension and complicity.
We encourage you to make these adjustments, and please submit your work back to us for a further critique.